How's my mic? Everything fine? I was reading a Reddit thread. Not that. I was reading this Reddit thread earlier. Players don't understand the concept of effectiveness as a dependent variable in a multivariable model. It's got 4.3k upvotes. Amazing. Effectiveness is the ability to be successful and produce intended results. Argue something is more effective, it helps to produce intended results faster and easier than another method. Sure, faster or easier. Since Genshin's harder content is combat-oriented, Genshin Theorycrafters argue that a team that can deal the most amount of damage in the least amount of time is the most effective. I don't know about this one. I don't think so. I don't think we argue this anymore. I don't think we've ever argued this. The most amount of damage in the least amount of time is the most effective. DPS is a measurement of effectiveness. Simple, right? If we analyze scientific models for effectiveness, you would find that all of them are multivariable models, since a complex variable to measure under the influence of several external factors, especially when it involves human factors. True. But this is predicated on the idea that we only value DPS. Which it isn't. Team effectiveness model. Robbins and Judge. Organizational behavior. Abilities of members, personalities, allocating roles, diversity, size of team, member flexibility. Yeah. Alright, you wouldn't measure just productivity, I guess, right? Efficacy. There's other things that can go into what an effective team looks like. Okay. Way more complex than, let's say, a spreadsheet with sales numbers, jobs completed per hour, or one single variable calculated with a single algorithm. Yeah, but let's take a look at what a basic sheet looks like, right? Let's see. Let's pull up Ayato's sheets. Let's see. This is a good example. Ayato. How the fuck do I find this again? It's in Theorycrafting, inside character findings, under a thread, Ayato archive thoughts. Alright, so let's see. Does a modern day, a relatively new Ayato, like a new master sheet, have only one variable measured? Okay, off the bat, we see the full KQM guide. Does this have the measurement of DPS in here? Damage per second. DPS. On-field DPS, okay, calls them an on-field DPS. As a burst DPS. On-field DPS, priority for his burst DPS, okay. Telling you how to build him if you want to play him as an on-field or off-field character. Let's go to his weapons. Okay. Where are they? Artifact sets. Weapons. Okay. Percent DPS. Okay. And we also characterize why something is that. Okay. So we don't just measure it in just DPS, right? PJC is one of Ayato's strongest weapon options because it has an unconditional and universal passive. Okay. Haran Gepaku Futsu is measured as 118.9%, but here's some notes. It's one of Ayato's strongest weapon choices, but with a niche passive that only works especially well with Ayato himself. Okay, so it's telling us it's good DPS, it's less than Primordial Jade Cutter, but it has a more niche passive, and it's not as high value as a Primordial Jade Cutter. Okay, let's look at, I don't know, here's some without notes, but if the Black Sword has notes here, Black 6 months, oh my god. God help you indeed. Black Sword is one of Ayato's strongest 4-star weapons. Okay, what does it do? It provides an invaluable crit rate and normal attack damage bonus and a healing passive. Okay, mostly negligible. It scales poorly with refines, especially that each refine costs $10. Okay, so it gives us a little bit more detail when, at least when we use DPS as a metric, right? We don't tell you what DPS it is. It's just relative to something else, something that informs us, right? And here's the assumptions for it. Okay. So the I2C0, level 90, talent 999, with 4 Heart of Deaths, attack, Hydro percent. It tells us like what we're building for, with 133% energy recharge, KQMC standard. Okay, so it means the substats are allocated to the KQMC standard. Okay, here's the rotation. Okay, Ayato Q, and then Ayato E N15, and then with these buffs on it. Okay, so immediately, theory crafters measure the influence of several external factors. Okay. That's cool. We've already done that. Primordial Jade Cutter. Good. Unconditionally good. Black Sword. Not as good because it costs $10, right? And this isn't... and if we go to teams, right? Okay, look. Okay, so we have DPS. Finally. It took us a while to find something like this, right? DPS, okay. What else do we have? We have a video of the rotation, how long it takes, and then a whole set of notes that classifies how hard or easy or how weak it is, or how hard it is to execute. Okay, all of Ayato's team composition seem medium or hard. Okay, and then here's the team DPS contribution, so we can see who's contributing the most. So if I wanted to build a Ayato Official Kazuha Bennett team, I could see who I needed to prioritize my investment into a bunch, right? Okay, so I've got Ayato pretty well geared. I think I need to upgrade my official a little bit more. I guess I could invest in a Kazuha, right? But it seems that Bennett doesn't really need much other than energy recharge, right? Okay, and then here's a bunch of notes. Okay, and immediately, this part's just wrong. Like, theory crafters don't argue that the meta is a team that can deal the most amount of damage. Let's look at another example, right? If we go to tier list maker, right, this should have the ranking for last time. Okay, almost immediately. All right, Bennett doesn't do that much DPS. He's a buffer for sure. He increases your DPS, but he also heals, which is why he's in SS, right? Xingqiu gives you damage resistance, Hydro application. He gives you stagger resistance. He does a bunch of stuff. Okay, he's not up there just because he does damage, right? Who else? We have... Who's up here that doesn't do DPS? Kokomi doesn't do DPS. She's an enabler for sure, right? So people kind of like get their panties in a twist quite often because characters are in B, why aren't they higher? But strictly speaking, being B tier in Genshin is not necessarily bad, right? You can still find clears, people using Xinyan in the Abyss, people using Kaching in the Abyss. There's videos of Kaching soloing the Ruined Serpent still, right? So why do we rank things? Well, because you can pull more value out of some units easier than others, right? Lisa is in B tier, but why is Lisa in B? Is it because she does no damage? No, she's not as easy to use. So like this post already is starting off on the wrong foot here. Theory crafters argue that a team that can deal the most amount of damage is the most effective. No. I don't know if that's ever been the case. Okay. To 24 hours of Le Mans. Art in the cars, 24-hour Le Mans is an endurance-focused race with the objective of covering the greatest distance in 24 hours. Jesus. Toxic. Why are my bit alerts in the middle? Okay. More speed is more distance covered in 24 hours. More effectiveness. What do you do if the car breaks down in the middle? You try to fix it as fast as possible. More speed this time. Okay, what happens if the car is unfixable? Because the engineers were so obsessed with speed they didn't care that they were building fast crumbling pieces of trash. It doesn't matter. Just register a lot of cars in the race and one of them might survive. Okay. It took them decades to discover that maybe building cars with some safety measures so they wouldn't explode and kill the pilots in the middle of the race would be more efficient than praying to God that a single car would survive. Effectiveness, while seemingly simple, is a very difficult concept to grasp, and it's understandable that Genshin Theorycrafters conferred this variable a single causal relationship with DPS, but we didn't. We haven't. For a very long time. For a very, very long time. Why do we rank Eula so low? We know how much damage a Eula team can do. We know how much damage you can squeeze out of Eula. And we know how much damage we can squeeze out of Eula when we play team compositions that are hard for her to survive and easy for her to survive, okay? So why do we rank Eula so badly when she has the DPS to clear very comfortably? Because she's hard to use. I think it's very simple. I don't agree that with the idea that Theorycrafters only measure DPS. This is just not true. Who are these Theorycrafters? Who's measuring just DPS? I'd like to talk to them in KQM. Honestly. I would like to have a genuine, honest talk with... True. Big true. Okay. It took them more than a year to discover that Favonius weapons were actually good. No. No. No, I think we've known for a very long time that Favonius weapons were actually good. For a very, very long time. Maybe not how good they were, but we've known for a very, very long time that that a Favonius sword is extremely strong. Can I have a link to this Reddit thread? Sure. Sorry, I just wanna chat for a little bit before I play Pokemon about at least something about Genshin, right? It took them more than a year to discover that Favonius weapons are actually good. Not true. In other words, it took them more than half a year of trial and error to discover that it was important for characters to have the energy needed to... This is just not true. No. This is not true. If you want to frame it in a way that we didn't know how effective Favonius weapons were, well, one, that would have to... Let's say it was the case that Theorycrafters didn't know that Favonius weapons were effective. Which isn't true. But let's say we didn't know. The reason why Favonius weapons didn't explode in popularity as they did was because you can still build energy recharge. You can still focus on energy recharge as a stat. A Favonius weapon increases that energy recharge basis of its substat, but what we didn't understand was that those clear particles mattered a lot more than we thought. When you optimize energy recharge for a team composition, With and without those clear particles, the energy recharge that you would have invested into your other characters without the clear particles ended up leading to a larger DPS increase than we had previously thought. And it's still fairly minor. It's not like humongous, right? It only gets really, really, really like big in terms of damage differences when like you run multiple Favonius units and your damage is focused in on like one unit, right? If you have an extremely energy hungry single unit, you can stack Favonius weapons and you can drive up the percentage very quickly. I would say that in soup compositions where like, yeah, you can drop down the energy recharge for everyone in mono teams and stuff like that. If you run like 3 Hydro units, it's probably a larger damage increase than just running like Favonius weapons. Favonius weapons are strong, but probably not like the end-all be-all of everything. And again, it wasn't that like it wasn't hard to know that the Favonius weapons were good for energy-hungry units. It's the idea that like, okay, how much damage do you gain from these clear particles and refines? It takes a while to find out. For one, most theory crafters are pretty free to play. They don't roll very often. They know how good a unit is, they know what a unit can and can't do, so they don't always roll. And if they don't roll all the time, they won't have a lot of Favonius refines, right? So it just takes a while to find everything out. Let's remember that Le Mans engineers were literally killing their pilots with death traps for decades before figuring that they focus on things besides power and speed. Okay. But we've known about energy recharge for a while, so let's just keep moving on. I think I've hammered that point enough. And the Genshin community as a whole at some point did figure out energy recharge is important. For a very long time. Since that variable has a strong correlation with damage, but there are other variables that... Okay. Survivability. When a lot of players clear the Abyss with 36 stars with Zhongli and other shielders, it's often repeated that shielders are useless. The shielder unit means a loss of potential DPS, and if you die or enemy staggered you mess up your rotation, you can simply restart the challenge. A shielder unit means a loss of potential DPS, and if you die or enemy stagger you messing your rotation, you can restart the challenge. True, a shielder that doesn't deal damage will increase the clear time, but isn't it faster to clear the content in a single slower run than clearing it during several fast runs, and which one is easier? Wanting to save seconds per run without a shielder or healer, you can easily lose minutes on several tries. And which team would be more effective? The one that needs a few or several tries? What is more effective? To have a single car that will finish the race, safely finish the race, or several cars that might explode in the middle of it? That's not a problem with our shieldless meta teams, that's a skill issue. Again, no theory crafter will ever say that like Zhongli is completely useless. I don't think we've ever stated that. But the idea that Zhongli would help your clear back when not many people could clear effectively is just silly. So back in the day when Zhongli like first came out, the idea of like physical DPS Zhongli came out, but you know, that was quickly kind of shut down, and you can see Jinx's old tweets about that, but I don't know where it came from, but the idea that like theory crafters think that shielding is useless comes from, I don't know. It's just not true. Shielders don't increase your DPS. That's true relative to like other gains that you can get even with Zhongli's resistance shred, but no theory crafter would ever really say shielders are completely useless. The single case that where we would lower the value on a unit like Zhongli is if you are a player that cannot clear the Abyss with just the standard team compositions with standard healing, you do not need to pool for a 5-star limited shielder. You just don't. Right? Zhongli will not get you over the hill if you can't clear the abyss. If you can barely clear the abyss, using Zhongli will not help you. You will lower the damage of your team composition and you won't be able to clear. So, when does Zhongli become useful? Okay, when you're way past that hill, alright? If I can use my Hu Tao with a Xingqiu and 2 dogs, I can slot in my Zhongli. That's cool. But let's be a little more honest, a little bit more ingenuous about like what Theorycrafters meant when we said that Zhongli was useless, right? Let's be a little more, let's be a little bit better, right? And certainly there are units that really do like shields, right? Yoimiya really likes shielding, Hu Tao really likes shielding, Eula really likes shielding, Zhao really likes shielding. Of course, it's always optional, but units with limited uptime, like hard limits on their uptime, really appreciate like the shielding so they don't get knocked out, right? So I'm not sure what else to really say about this. It's just when a lot of players clear the abyss with 36 stars with Zhongli and other shielders. Okay, you're making an argument against nobody here. If you can already clear with 36 stars, that's very cool. But don't go around recommending Zhongli to other people because you can clear it with Zhongli. Don't make that mistake, right? Because if I have a very weak roster, slotting in Zhongli is not going to help me clear against a Ruined Serpent. Alright, let's keep moving. Human factors and variety of game devices. While a spreadsheet with easy to understand numbers seems neutral and objective enough, it ignores a simple truth, that the player who is supposed to generate these numbers during actual gameplay isn't an AI, but a human being with different skill sets that can provide different inputs on different devices. Genshin teams are tools that allow players to achieve the objective, clear the content, and different players will have different skills that will allow them to use different tools with different levels of effectiveness. In other words, some teams will be easier to play for some than others. The skill issue argument states that players should take the time to train the so-called meta teams if they aren't good enough with them. But what is easier and faster, to use the tools that better synergize with your own personal skill set and inputs, or to take the time and train to be able to utilize the better tools? Should we make a car that a pilot can easily drive, or should we train the pilot to drive a car that was built considering theoretical calculations and not their human limitations? What is more effective? So I don't even know what I want. I don't even know what I have to say. Look at this. It literally has a difficulty rating. I don't know what else you could say. You could go to the compendium. You can see our ranking for how hard or easy it is, right? Difficulties: easy, medium, hard, mechanically demanding or unforgiving rotations. Any deviation will result in large DPS losses, right? Like, come on, let's be more honest, okay? What Theorycrafter is going around telling people that Hu Tao is unequivocally, with no caveats, the best unit? How do you know that the easier to use alternatives from Hu Tao are good? How do you know that easier versions of these strong team comps exist? Because at some point, the Theorycrafters thought to themselves, hey, this is really good damage, but like, this sucks. So let's calc easier stuff to use. How do you know that stuff is easier to use and good? Because we calced it. How do we know that it's difficult? Because before we think of a rotation, we think to ourselves, hey, maybe we should play this composition in game and find out whether or not it's difficult in the first place. Right? Hu Tao sucked for a while. For like a couple days after her release. And then we found her animation cancels. Right? And we made those animation cancels even better. So we know that Hu Tao can be very, very good to very, very middling, depending on how you pilot her. Is it wrong for a theory crafter to say that the performance that you get out of Hu Tao will vary depending on how well you perform? Okay, that's fine. Does Hu Tao having more difficult rotations and compositions and cancels detract from other units? No. I don't know. What is easier, to use the tools that train? Like, this is so disingenuous. Do Le Mans like companies pick up random drivers and toss them in cars? No. They do both. They optimize the car so that it's safe. They optimize the driver so that they have the appropriate skill and endurance to last the whole race, right? Theory crafting is the same. We explore different types of cars, different types of team compositions. We rate them, how easy they are, how hard they are, and then boom. You as a pilot, a driver, can pick a car that you want to be in. and we already know about the difficulty of mobile, right? If you go back and watch like our VOD on Zhongli, yeah, if you're a mobile player, Zhongli is awesome. Zhongli is awesome, right? So I honestly don't know. Where are these theory crafters? Who's saying this? It's not KQM. You can go into TC General. You can go into our theory crafting channels. You can go to our questions, please help. You can ask them what we think about all of this stuff. You'll probably get the same answer. Maybe you'll get like a couple people that kind of skill issue you, sure, but like, what are you gonna do? People are elitists in every game. We try to control for it, but you know, it happens. Generalized versus specialized units. Most people value more versatile units over specialized ones, but is it true that MiHoYo tends to develop content? It is true that MiHoYo tends to develop content with specific units in mind, providing enemies with elemental shields, buffing specific weapon types and attacks, and while resources are limited, and that simple fact should tip the scale towards generalized teams, it's also a fact that resource flow is a never-ending constant. MiHoYo tends to develop content with specific units in mind. I don't know if this is true. I do not think this is true. MiHoYo developing content with specific units in mind. What content? Maybe like torches with Amber, right? But if we're talking about the meta, we're talking about the Abyss, right? So what content in the Abyss requires a very specific unit? They develop chambers, right? With the idea that you need grouping. But is that specific to any one particular character anymore? You could argue that the floor 11 buff is the most developed content that we have that has a very specific unit in mind, right? If we scroll back our minds a little bit, back to when Kazuha came out, okay, they made swirls do 300% multiplicative damage on floor 11. That's it. That's it. They make floor 11 of the Abyss more tailored to a specific unit. But let's scroll back just one banner before that. Eula's floor 11 was not very friendly for Eula at all. Eula's floor 11 had the water hydro aura on you so that you couldn't cast her E at all, right? So they can bring things up, they can bring things down, but let's be honest. The later floors of the Abyss these days aren't really that tailored to any one specific unit, right? Today, if they buff swirls to buff Kazuha, You don't need Kazuo to abuse that. You could have cleared that floor 11 with Sucrose auto attacks, Animo main character's E. I cleared it with Animo main character's E, just holding down the E and killing everything in the room, right? So, is it true that a generalized unit is better than a specialized unit? I don't know. It depends, right? And is Kokomi a really specialized unit anymore? What makes a unit more specialized than another? Is Child more specialized than Kokomi or generalized than Kokomi, right? What do you think? I think they're both very, very generalized. Hydro in general is very, very generalized. What units are very, very specialized? Goro is specialized. Sara is pretty specialized. Who else? Shenhe is pretty specialized. But do we ever rate these specialized units super high? Is it possible for Theorycrafters to evaluate a unit based on how much damage they can do and how easily they do it? Impossible. Absolutely not. We only rate things by DPS, as you know. Resources, costs, and opportunity costs. People talk about meta teams as if only a couple of them were worth building, because in this game, resources are limited. But it comes to a point when improving a team a little bit becomes more expensive than building another specialized team from the ground up. And in a game where content is developed for specialized units, what's more effective, to have 2 teams at 95% of their potential or 4 teams at 90%? I think this person doesn't know what they're talking about anymore. Straight up. I think they've lost it. If you are playing a team composition at 90% of their potential, you are smoking that floor. You are absolutely smoking that floor. If you play a team comp at 70% of its potential, you are smoking that floor. We talk about resource management when it comes to the idea that, like, theory crafting has conclusions that are healthy for players who cannot yet clear the abyss. Is it worth it to have 4 teams that are like level 60, level 70 with pretty shit artifacts on all of them? Or is it better to have 2 teams with their recommended artifacts, you know, decent crit and crit damage on their carry with, you know, just enough attack with the leveled up weapons? The answer is you want to stack your resources into the 2 teams because you need to clear the abyss. This idea that, like, we're only calculating things for 95% or 90% of their potential is so dumb. This person does not follow theory crafting at all. I already know. Like, I read this and I think this person has never tried to clear the abyss as an early game player before. Alright, so I'm sure a lot of you in my chat, I'm sure a lot of you guys can clear the abyss now, right? Back when the abyss was going, would you prefer to have a bunch of, like, random level 70 units with, like, level 60 weapons and, like, random artifacts? Or would you rather have had 2 strongly built team compositions with, like, 4 units in general built up, like, to maybe 60, 120? You would rather have the 2 teams with the with 4 units that are, like, barely built and struggle busting it, right? And this is not even like 40% of the potential. You're at the fucking bottom still, right? You can still clear, but you're gonna struggle there. The advice that theory crafting comes to is different, or the knowledge that theory crafting provides you is differently applied depending where you are in the game. Would I recommend Zhongli to a new player that's on PC? Probably not. Why the fuck would you need one? Just run a Bennett, run a, like, a healer. You can run around with a Barbara, okay? You do not need a shielder. He will not help you clear the abyss. Are you a mobile player who's bing chilling in the overworld, who has a little bit of difficulty doing the Noblesso domain, doesn't care about the abyss? Sure. Go ahead, load up the Zhongli banner, bro. You got it. We'll tell you how to build it. We'll tell you how to use them. That's the end of that. The effectiveness model for Genshin that considers multiple variables should look like this: damage, energy recharge, survivability, versatility, specialization, player's current and past resources, cost, opportunity cost, player's skill set, player's device and controller, player's motivation. This hypothetical model has been scientifically proven, and every multivariable model has different weights of influence on each independent variable, and the correlation between variables should also be considered. The objective of this theoretical model is to showcase how other variables besides damage can impact the effectiveness of each unit, which might explain why so-called non-meta units have been empirically proven to be effective. So, if we look at a tier list from a Theorycrafter's perspective, and we look at something in the B tier, does that mean that you can't clear with anything in the B tier or below? No. Does anyone in Theorycrafting Discord ever say that you can't clear Kaching because we think she's in C tier? No. Do you think, like, I can go into Theorycrafting, I can find a video of someone clearing the Ruin Serpent with Kaching solo? Does that mean I think that Kaching is bad or good? No. I don't know, man. I don't know if this post is indicative. I think there's a lot of buzzwords in here that, like, yeah, you know what? I think Theorycrafters are really toxic. They must only think about DPS. Interesting conclusion. In conclusion, TLDR, an effective Genshin team can't be calculated using a spreadsheet based on theoretical damage numbers. But it can. There's only one single factor to take into consideration. True! An effective Genshin team comp can be calculated. There's not a single factor that we take into consideration when we go beyond that. It's also important to consider what players feel easier and more appealing to use, and that more team options is going to be better for content developed for specialized units rather than generalists. Alright guys, let's churn our brains here. Let's put our thinking caps together. What content in the Abyss is so specialized that you can't run a certain unit? What Abyss floor is so restrictive that you can only use specialized units? Slimes? Disqualifying your damage from Hydro, like the Hydro Mimics and like Cryo Slimes? You can't kill a Pyro Cube with a Deluge. You can't break shields without things, but is that specialized? Or is that a knowledge check or a preparation check for a player knowing how to break these shields beforehand, or having, like, you don't even need these units built, right guys? Who here is leveling up like Akaya or the Rosaria to break the shield of a Hydro Abyss shield? You don't need to do that either. You could roll in with a level 1 Chongyun and just beat him up by swapping, right? But we're at the point now where we don't need to do this, right? More and more units start eating up into each other's value, right? So when you have a wider roster of units, specialized units don't really have a place in Genshin because they don't really exist. Almost everybody can do almost anything. It's very rare that we run into hard stops like, okay, you can't kill a Hydro Slime with a Hydro unit. You got me there, bro. But, okay, who out here is running only Hydro DPS? A mono Hydro. Who here is running a mono Hydro team, expects to clear the Abyss, and doesn't have anything else built? Is Theorycrafting recommending you to build mono hydro team compositions? Pull for Kazuha, pull for Xingqiu, pull for Yulan and a child, and run around with mono hydro in the abyss? You got it. Who's doing that? Right? I don't agree with the idea that the content is developed for specialized units. I think the game is designed around making you interact more with the elemental system because it's how the game gets its depth, right? If a player can clear comfortably the hardest content in the game with a specific team, and that team is effective for that player, that team is meta. No. No, it's not. If a player can clear comfortably the hardest game in the content in the game with a specific team, and that team is effective for that player, that means you've built so far beyond the point that you, as a player, do not need to play meta anymore. That your investment breakpoint has exceeded the floor that you need to reach to do damage. Time to whip out paint, guys. Alright. Let's say you have like some DPS, some amount of DPS that you need to hit, right? So you need to do like what, 28k plus DPS to clear the abyss? So let's say you're a new player and let's say you just cleared the abyss and you're like right here. Okay. So let's say you can barely clear. You're a new player. You need 28 or above DPS. Okay. So you're telling me that you would recommend Zhongli. Okay, you're safer. You don't die, but you can't 36 star anymore. Okay, your DPS is dropped below. Okay, now this is safer, lower DPS with Zhongli, right? It's not a huge drop, but it's enough to drop you below the point that you need to clear. So, let's see. A vet, right? So a veteran player. Let's say you can clear all the way up here. You're Bing chilling. You do so much damage, you smash this abyss. Okay? But okay, let's add Zhongli. Okay. For a player that can comfortably clear the abyss, this is your meta, right? That's so cool, man. I'm so happy. I'm happy that you have played the game long enough, you've gotten lucky enough with your artifacts, that you can clear very comfortably. And you can pull Zhongli and you can clear with your eyes closed. I'm very happy for you. Truly. It can be pretty sucky with the RNG in the game. But let's not do this, okay? Let's not do this. Okay? Let's not. I didn't write this to attack the Theorycrafter community, but analyze why some people disregard units that are proven by a lot of players to be useful. Who's disregarding what, bro? Nice Pokemon gameplay? Yeah, true. A survey? An academic research paper. Okay, let's do the survey. I'm a dude. I'm 20. I am... Nationality? American. Web events, please select each source of information. Do you consider it canon for your Genshin Impact experience? Does it impact your understanding of the story? What you should consider canon. Not really. Very canon, collected miscellaneous story and character teasers in general. Yeah, pretty good. Personal theories. None at all, not really. Oh, actually, yeah. Content published on not at all. maybe a little. Content published, sometimes. Friends' opinions, sometimes. In-game events. Are they canon? Yeah, probably. Fanfics? No. Official manga? Very. Videos? Sometimes. Content? Sometimes. Hangouts? Yeah, they're pretty canon. Content published at Hoyo Lab? Yeah, no. Birthday pictures? Cool. Alright. This was originally posted at Ito mains, Eula mains, and Zhao mains, but following recommendations from these subs and considering that our generated controversy that there's a KQM TC representative already into the discussion, is that me? It wasn't me. I decided to post it here too. Who's this? Who did this? I'm the representative. Wait a minute. Guys, it really wasn't me. Who was it? Here, let's see. Let me see our staff org chart. Okay. So this is our org chart, and let's see. On our admin team, we have me, and I am in charge of outreach and theory crafting. Okay. I don't have an emissary. I don't have anyone that works underneath me. Maybe some people on my staff did. Okay, so, you know, one of any of these people could have done it. But I'm gonna ask and see who did it. Who is the representative of Kachink mains that responded? I would like to see what they said. I'm very curious. Who's speaking out for KQM? Alright. I decided to post it here, and even though it's not my main topic of research, I already kicked the hornet's nest, and now I have to take responsibility. Considering all the comments I've already received, I have to add the following, making the original long post even longer. But I'm really going to dive deep into research methodology, so I'd honestly recommend most readers to skip this part. Social sciences are hard, way harder than people think. True. Some people that believe that to do science, you only need to get some numbers from an experiment, replicate it a couple of other times from other people, and get a popular theory or even a law. Things don't work out that way for social sciences. We need both quantitative and qualitative studies at the level of exploratory, descriptive, and comparative research at each stage using large samples. When we consider the human factor, we have to study phenomenon from a social science perspective. Genshin has a human factor. If we need to define, develop independent models for complex variables like player's skill set, focus on Genshin Impact, so we could add them compact effectiveness model. After we already got the model, we have to weigh each. This is talking about the model. A lot of data, you need it. It isn't worth it. Not worth it from a gameplay point of view. Not worth it from an economic point of view. Not worth it from an academic point of view. Wouldn't be useful for MiHoYo. It might be useful for MiHoYo. What's the point of my stupid model? Simply to show that there are other important variables besides DPS to measure effectiveness. Genshin Theorycrafters do an outstanding job of measuring DPS. I do follow their calcs, and I recommend that every player does, but they aren't the only variable to answer, and they won't guarantee effectiveness. We say this in the notes of every single calc we do. Theirs are the only hard numbers that we will realistically get, and the responsibility of other variables might have to fall over the player. They might have to be valued considering personal assessments, and you know what? That's okay. What would be the point of the game if we got all the answers before playing it? So, all in all, I think that this write-up kind of mischaracterizes theory crafters. Maybe if this was written like 2 years ago, it would have made sense. Right? Like a year and a half ago, it would have made sense. Yeah, bro, we shouldn't measure stuff by DPS. But strangely, I don't ever recall theory crafters back in the day only measuring by DPS? Strange. Very strange. Fucking KQM official. LOL. Who the fuck was this? Anyway. It's an interesting post for sure. Check what the rarest possum linked. It was fucking Hazel. Of course it was. Okay. So here's Hazel responding. Hi, I'm the vice head of KQMTC. I main Yoimiya because she's easy to play. I think this is based on an extremely flawed misconception of what KQM thinks. Pretty much what I said. Much of our theory crafting takes into account like comfort, not just sheet DPS. No. Additionally, KQM isn't monolithic. It's a community like any other people who value comfort more, and with people who value sheet DPS more. It's pretty flawed to just categorize the dozens and dozens of theory crafters. There's like 20 of us. People who think who 99% of the time talk as if people didn't play Genshin on mobile. We have a significant amount of people who play specifically on mobile and on controller or still do TC. Okay. Hi Azel, I have followed your roundtables for a while, and I don't remember you guys often saying, this character is better on PC with mouse and keyboard, this one is ideal for controllers, this one is for mobile. We talk about this when it's pretty relevant, but I'm not gonna lie guys, 90% of the characters in the game, you can hold one button and just do damage, right? It only gets a little more complicated when, with Ganyu, you have to aim. Jiao, you kind of have to think a little bit. Hu Tao, you gotta do your little animation cancel sometimes. When you talk about damage ceilings, that's a different story. And that's the problem. If you mention once that a certain X character might be more comfortable on mobile, but 99 times that character Y does more damage, what do you think the public is going to internalize? When we talk about damage ceilings. If I mention once that certain X character might be more comfortable on mobile, and then the other 99 times I say another character does more damage, what do you think people will internalize? Sure, but I don't think that KQM only talks about damage. I remember clearly you guys laughing at the idea of using Diana because she fell off of the meta months ago. Specifying that Zhongli isn't meta, no matter how much people use him, saying that people openly suck at the game. Okay. I think I do remember this. Diana is not a very good unit. The shield is a lot weaker than you would think. But if you want to use Diana, no one's gonna stop you. Specifying that Zhongli is... we've talked about this enough. Notice that when you're diplomatic when you speak, but that's not the case with more vocal members of your community. So, KQM will ban you or mute you in KQM if you were noticeably like mega toxic in another community. If you get reported spamming like a bunch of random toxicity, I will ban you. But does that mean I go around patrolling, you know? Do I ask people to link their discords to make sure, you know, you're not one of mine? Like, I don't know. You guys actually discuss comfort more, but your community representatives usually discuss DPS, DPS, DPS. I just don't agree. I don't know. I think I just don't agree. I just if you don't think that KQM values comfort, why do you think on our website we have guides for characters that we don't consider S tier or S tier? Why don't you just go ask in our questions please help channel what you think you should do? Why don't you go ask in TC, right? Maybe on our podcast we're a little too fiery, but I don't agree that we only talk about DPS on our podcast. I think every single time we've done a DPS tier list or anything like that, we admit very openly, okay, if you need shielding, sure, you can use Zhongli. Diona is not a very good unit because there are better alternatives for you. You can get your healing or survivability from somewhere else and use another support for better damage. Why do we focus on damage? Because that's how you're going to clear the abyss. Okay. I think that's all I have to really say about that. I'm just I don't know. I just don't get why people do this. Like I just don't understand like Azel's response was perfectly fine. I don't know what he means when he says kicks the hornet's nest. Like maybe English isn't their first language or something, or maybe they use the wrong euphemism, but like that implies like a lot more like more negative reaction than what I've seen. I don't know. I just don't agree with the idea that like KQM in general perpetuates like this idea that only DPS is important. Maybe it's lost in translation from like being in the Theorycrafter community to like our resources out there, right? Maybe that's the case. I think that is the case, but you know, we'll live. People seem to have a huge chip on their shoulder whenever TC comes up. Yeah, maybe.